everybody, and welcome into Perspectives. As you can see, we're like all the other folk in TV right now. We're opting out for the safety of sheltering at home, and so I'm coming to you from home. And our guest today comes to us from her office, and our guest is Tracey Lyall, which she's CEO of DBIS here in Tulsa. Tracey, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you on board. If you would, for the benefit of the folks at home, would you explain what Domestic Violence Intervention Services is all about?
Sure. So we are a nonprofit located in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we serve families who are impacted by domestic or sexual violence, pretty much in any form. So, certainly physical or sexual violence. But oftentimes the types of abuse that you may not see, emotional and mental abuse also. So we are a pretty large nonprofit in Tulsa, and we serve a couple of different ways. We shelter families who perhaps don't have another way to find safety or cannot go to another place for safety. So we have a shelter where we serve families who are impacted by violence. We have outpatient counseling services for adults, both male and female, as well as children who've witnessed domestic violence. Of course, then also when you kind of cross over into the legal realm of services, assisting people who are filing emergency protective orders, who need some measure of safety by an order of protection from the court. And so we assist that way, as well as have attorneys on staff who assist with divorce, child custody, and those sort of matters.
If you find yourself in the position of having to take someone into protective custody, be that a child or an adult, one would assume that not everybody's going to have an address of where they are. Am I correct on that?
Correct. So if we were sheltering someone who needed safety, they would be sheltered in an anonymous location.
All right. Before we get any deeper into this, I want to kind of qualify where we stand. Let's go back 10 weeks before all this shelter in place started. Can you kind of give me an overview of numbers without being too specific? And I know this is catching you at a disadvantage, but there has to be a norm, things that you've come to expect. This is before the virus.
Certainly. Just for instance, our emergency shelter is a 91-bed facility, and pretty much all the time we consider ourselves to be at capacity in our emergency shelter. And very often we are on what we call high lethality, looking for really some indicators of pretty severe harm or death as part of our screening process when we're screening people who are asking to come to our shelter. So there's some key indicators that we look for in our screening process that would tell us who's most at danger. And we use those as a matter of course every day outside of quarantine time. And so our shelter is literally near full all the time.
All the time. Now, let's jump ahead. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It is a world-gripping situation. Have the numbers increased?
Actually, in Tulsa, what we saw during the quarantine time is really a drop in requests for help, not an increase. And we attribute that mostly to that people are quarantining in their home with their families and children at home out of school, and may not be able to reach out for help.
Uh-huh.
particularly if they're in an unsafe situation during this time. So our calls for assistance in on our crisis line have declined during the quarantine. Now we anticipate that as we begin to move back towards becoming more mobile in the community, and that the community opens up for business, so to speak, that we will begin to see an influx of people who have been unable to reach out to us for help and that are now going to need our help.
I would have thought just the opposite to be true. I really would have, because of the close proximity everyone is forced to endure. Schools closed except for computer learning. Uh, so many people out of work right now. And, the constant threat of this thing and hanging over everybody's head. So I'm very surprised by those numbers. And again, my thinking has just kind of gone, whoa, because I thought it would be just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
When you take a child, let's deal with children first. When you bring a child in, how far do you follow that child? There has to be a cutoff point where you pass the child along to someone. After you've taken the child, you have all the legal T's crossed and the I's dotted. Now it's time for this child to have a better shot at a better life. Where do they go? Where do they end up?
So I might just clarify here that our work at Divis, we're working with children who are coming through our doors that are with their protective parent. Mm-hmm. So children or with their foster parents. So we might find that a foster family is coming in for counseling because a child has been placed in state custody, and the state is in the process of determining whether or not that child can return to a safe parent. So thankfully, we are not the decision makers about where a child may go at the end of that time. If they're in the state's custody, the state, of course, along with the courts, would begin to determine where the safest place is for that child to remain permanently. Our therapists really are just working with the protective parent, if there is a protective parent in the picture, or with foster parents who are caring for a child, mm-hmm. to provide some therapies to help those kids overcome the trauma that they've experienced, not only from the violence that they might have seen or witnessed at home, but also the trauma of being separated from the parents that they knew. So luckily, we're helping children through that journey to that end state, and sort of being eyes and ears for the court and for the state in terms of the child's progress around their trauma.
Do you ever find yourselves faced with a knock at the door and it's a young person looking for help?
Sure. We have people who maybe walk in at our office during the daytime looking for help in a crisis. We oftentimes will have somebody that may walk up to our shelter if they just don't know that it's a shelter, or do know, and just seek help or a safe place to stay. We tend to manage those types of crises daily, because we have counselors who are specifically designated crisis days for when that happens. When somebody walks in and is sort of unexpected without an appointment that is in a crisis, so that we can then help them manage what their next best steps will be for themselves and their family.
Tracey, I know you're aware of this, but there is an entire subculture out there that exists way beyond what you and I are used to. And I'm referring at this point to the homeless culture. The thing I've noticed as of late are the large number, and I have seen firsthand these folks, of young people living under bushes, walking the streets, clearly in need of help. And yet they don't always knock on your door, do they?
No, they don't. And there is, of course, quite a homeless population of younger and older people in Tulsa, sometimes sheltering themselves outside or living in encampments in the community. Um, and they don't always come in for assistance when they need it. I think that's why this time during quarantine has been so important for us to be saying that we are at Divis considered an essential business, and we still are available. We still are sheltering people. We still have a 24-hour crisis line. We have counselors available to talk with people via telehealth, and that we are, as much as possible, still continuing to provide services to people who need it.
Yeah, I know. I've watched a lot of young folk maneuver in and out of places like Quick Trip. Quick Trip has the sign, safe place. I've seen it on buses. I've started to pay more and more attention to the plight of the younger homeless people out there, wondering, somewhere there's a mother or a father, there has to be, who would either A, like to know where you are, like to hear from you. I would think that's the case, but I'm not always privy, obviously, to what's going on in that young person's life. Tracey, we're running out of time very quickly. If somebody wants to lend support to DVIS, what's the best way they can do it?
Certainly they can go to our website at dvis.org or give us a call at 918-743-5763.
We're out of time. Thank you for taking time out of your day. And I will echo what you just said. You are essential. We appreciate you and the whole bunch over there. Thank you for the job you're doing. All right. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more right after this.